Henry, when I first met you in the airport in San Diego, I knew from that first moment that I wanted you as a friend. So I'm going to screw this up already. Eudaimonia, right?
Yeah, eudaimonia. You're talking about eudaimonia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a Greek term, right?
Yes, yes. I don't know when it was first used, but I know Aristotle used it.
I think the word actually means human flourishing, according to something I read of yours. Is that correct?
Yeah, something along those lines. I mean, I think it's often translated as, well, it has been translated as blessedness or well-being. The point is, it's a little bit more than just joy. It means a state of, of what we would generally consider goodness in somebody's life and around them. So it's not merely joy or happiness.
So, stealing a short line from your book, you talk about the joy of complete freedom. My experience with you is that in good times and bad, busyness and slowness and everything, that you bring that shine and that lightness with you. And so I got to ask you first, maybe an embarrassing question, but are you happy?
It's very nice to be able to say that, yes, I am. I mean, but how would I approach it? It's not quite so simple. I mean, first of all, yes, it's quite clear to me that in the heart of every moment, there's a infinite love available, always. At the same time, there are many, many beings suffering, and of course, we cannot but feel that. And in fact, it seems to me, the further we go in a practice like the one that I follow, the more and more acutely we feel it, and the more responsible we feel. Somehow, the more urgent it is that we respond in some way. We have our existence cannot any longer be considered separate. In fact, our existence, it's not so much that it's not separate, it just is all other beings. So how can we really say, well, yes, I'm happy, when there's a lot of suffering? But on the other hand, there's a notion actually in the tradition that the so-called bodhisattva, profoundly caring for the suffering of all beings, is in a state of joy at the same time.
I don't know that I find that in contradiction. My next question was going to be, is your happiness conditional? But we're talking about the two main themes that I want to talk about today, which is suffering and happiness, and relief of the burden of self, and the opening of the heart.
Well, I mean, can I just go to that point, actually? I mean, if suffering is conditional, if happiness is conditional, I don't think it's really happiness. It's having some desire met, but that's not happiness. Not in the way I would understand it. That's why I was using that word well-being or eudaimonia in the book, because it's to make clear that it's not conditional. It goes. I mean, well, I don't know how fast I want to be jumping into the deep Zen stuff, but in a certain sense, okay. I mean, we're really looking at the fundamental of our existence. Basically, is available to us all the time. So that's where the unconditional well-being is to be found.
Right.
And any other kind of conditional well-being is not that.
Right. Well, we're also going to touch upon equanimity in this. But looking back, without going into a great detail of your career, you have a very remarkable biography. We'll just put it at that. And you're highly educated, and that there was a goal of becoming a great writer, and yet that seemed to create a great deal of angst for you. The ambition, this sort of challenge with yourself about trying to write something that was significant. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I probably partly because of the shame thing, you know, I was very driven as a writer. I mean, I wrote my first book when I was just 19, and
19?
Yeah, and I carried on right through, you know, I've published 8 books so far, and you know, this one that you've read is a 9th, you know, if it gets published, I don't know, but I would say that writing was, I grew up in this literate world. You know, both my parents were teachers or lecturers, professors at Oxford University.
You went to Oxford as well.
I went to Cambridge.
You went to Cambridge, right?
Yeah, just to be a bit different, you know.
and to get away from the parents a little bit.
Kind of, you know. And in fact, I started doing a PhD. You know, I was going to be maybe on track to follow that kind of thing. That was on Homer. I loved Greek poetry actually, but somehow, yeah, the world that I grew up in. Somehow, I got the message that the highest calling of a human being was to write a great novel. There was no better use of a human lifetime than to write a great novel. I mean, I guess we were still in the end of the age of the novel, you know, and there were all these great examples like, you know, Dickens and, I don't know, Somerset Maugham and D.H. Lawrence, Conrad, yeah, well, whoever, you know, wherever you turn, you get loads of them, you know. And that's sort of what you had to really do. That was the best way to spend your life, you know. And I just swallowed that. And actually, I think I always had a greater, well, I think I was more naturally a poet, actually. So finally, after years of, you know, I got started very young with my writing life, but I was never really satisfied with what I'd written. Certain point, I went back into poetry, which I'd done as a teenager, very happily, actually. And I started writing poetry again, and I enjoyed it a great deal, and I was much more sort of relaxed about it. And then my first poetry book came out. I guess it was my 4th book to be published. And it did way better than the other 3 books I'd then published, and won prizes and reprinted numerous times. And suddenly I was actually kind of being a writer in a way that was far more comfortable for me. But I couldn't let go, really, of this novel thing. I got to crack the great novel, you know. So I carried on with that, 3 more books of fiction. And I mean, I was very lucky. I don't mean to be complaining at all. I know I was extraordinarily fortunate in my publishing life, because I had great publishers who were very, very good to me, much more so than I merited. It's a game, that literary world, and I never understood that, actually. I took it very seriously. I thought it was like life or death, producing the great work. You know?
You used the word masturbator. Does that tie into this at all? I love that word.
Yeah, it's not my word. It was Albert Ellis, this great...
It's a great word.
Therapist, you know, he's a brilliant guy. He pioneered cognitive therapy, really. And I don't know how much people recognize that these days, but he was the one who said, you know, lying on a couch 5 times a week, pissing and moaning, as he put it, doesn't really get you any better. On the other hand, if you pick up these old classical philosophers, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and the Stoics, basically, and you do what they said, which is, you've got to look at how you're thinking. If you examine your thinking, you can find how you're making yourself miserable. He said, basically, it's not what happens to us that makes us unhappy. It's how we think about it. Just like Shakespeare. Yeah. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. He had this term, masturbator, meaning telling yourself musts. This must happen, I must do this, they must not do that. That's the shortcut to deep upsetness, you know. As far as
well, I cracked up as soon as I read it, because of course I misread it when I first read it.
As many do.
Yeah, and then I looked at it and I went, oh my God, that's a perfect description of my adult life, right? So in any case, this is really all coming back to this word suffering, which I want to explore with you. And there's this guy, Buddha's journey would say, is really about the cause of suffering and the solution to suffering. And because a lot of the people viewing this are not Zen Buddhists or have that tradition, maybe you could just give us a brief view of Shakyamuni Buddha, who really, we're going to sort of track through some of his stuff today.
Yeah. Let me just sort of preface this by saying, you know, maybe that can help greatly in the management of suffering. Mm-hmm. Shakyamuni wasn't satisfied with that kind of thing. He wanted to go as deep as one could go. This is how I understand it, and it's how we take it in the Zen Buddhist tradition. That, I mean, in a nutshell, he was a young, privileged guy, and he realized as a youth that he was going to die, that his mortality was real. He actually was able to face it, which frankly many of us can't. You know, really, I'm going to die. At some point, maybe we really get that. He got it young. And because of that, growing up in his privileged life, with all the things that money could buy, he realized that no matter what he could sort of consume, so to speak, you know, no matter what pleasures he could buy, they weren't going to help, really. Because the fundamental issue was his mortality. So, since I'm going to die, I've got to know what it is that's alive. First of all, what is it to be alive? Secondly, who is it that is alive? You know, these are questions that can come to really be uppermost for us. You know, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It's unpredictable. For him, they came up early and burningly, to the extent that he was prepared to leave his life of conspicuous consumption and of wealth and pleasure, and swing exactly the other way to a life of deep and profound renunciation. Became very, very sort of a hardcore ascetic. Did very austere practices that he was guided in, and he mastered them. And one set of things under a teacher who wanted to have him be a successor, and then again another set of practices. This is all sort of, I guess, in the Hindu tradition, you know, really. And then doing another set of practices, again mastered them. Became so emaciated from all the fasting that his ribs were sticking out. He'd sit so long, so still that birds nested in his beard, and, you know, grass grew up through his sitting mat. But even when he'd mastered this stuff, he still wasn't at peace. He still hadn't resolved his real deep, fundamental question of, you know, what is this personhood, this me, this sense of me having this existence? What is it? So at a certain point when he was almost dead from his practices, he decided this isn't working, and took nourishment, looked after himself, and he remembered an occasion in his youth when he'd been a boy, actually, presumably quite a young boy. I think they say about 6 years old, when his nurse left him under a tree, a rose apple tree, during a spring ploughing festival. His nurse went off to join in the dancing and the festivities, left him under the tree, and he watched the plough come by, the oxen trampling the grasses and the blades of the plough cutting through the grass, and he noticed that there were all these little insects living in the grass, and their world was going through a cataclysm. The blades and the hooves and you know, they were running around in a frenzy, many of them being killed. And as he saw it, a wave of compassion for their suffering welled up in him, and he felt tremendous sort of sorrow on their behalf. Hard on the heels of that came this sudden sense that their life and his own life simply were not two separate things. They were one life. He and they were one existence. And that brought a great love and even joy into his heart. This was when he was 6 years old. Many years later, he remembers that moment and he thinks, wait a minute, back then it happened naturally that I discovered a union with all beings. And it was so beautiful and joyous, and I'd felt so resolved then. Why don't I try to do the same thing again? So he sat down under a tree, nourished. He said, I'm just going to sit here and not actually pursue this practice, that practice. I'm just going to sit here and let my own heart lead me. Let it do what it needs and wants to do. And, well, I see this as a marvelous sort of template for what we do really in Zen. We sit still and we allow our hearts to do what they need to do. In his case, he, being such a gifted meditator, it took only 6 days. On the sixth morning, supposedly, as dawn broke, he was looking up at the sky and he saw Venus, the morning star, twinkling in the sky. And he had this great awakening, so-called. He went from being Shakyamuni to Buddha, meaning awakened one. So, of course, we have to ask, well, what does awakened mean? Awakened from what? Awakened to what? We get a little hint of that in what he's said to have said, which is when he saw the morning star, he's supposed to have said, how marvelous. I and all beings and the whole great earth together simultaneously have attained the way. So, this statement is like, well, how come all creation has done it together at the same time? It's not I, Shakyamuni, have awakened. It's all things have awakened. That's a hint to what the experience really was. Well, maybe I'll spell it out a little bit. The sense of separation is absolutely gone. The self that defines itself by separation. It only is a self because it's not all other things. That is its definitional condition, that vanished. So it discovered the way with a capital W.
So, okay, we're talking about Shakyamuni, Buddha, and awakening, and what the word Buddha really means. It means awakened one, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And his real focus was really on a word that we call dukkha, which we call suffering, which sounds like a pretty extreme word to me. It sounds like, okay, we're with Biafran refugees. But the word is actually much more comprehensive.
He reckoned that all of us are suffering, that we suffer in various ways. We don't get what we want, we get what we want and lose it. We have physical pain, we cause ourselves mental anguish, and that he thought actually deep down in our very sense of being, there are 3 cravings. Craving for physical comfort, craving or for sensual pleasure, craving for existence, craving for non-existence, and that these are sort of fundamental to our being, and they cause a kind of constant rumble of unease. We constantly have a thirst, as he called it, which underlies dukkha. He called it tanha. Thirst is constantly there. Thirst for something, for somehow our experience is not sufficient. Right. It's either too much or too little. We got this and we don't want it. We haven't got that and we do want it. There's always a thirst for it to be fulfilled, and it isn't yet in us. To become sort of whole and complete in the sort of sense that I don't know what's quite wrong. I just know that something's missing. Yes, a habitual sense that... Yeah. For those people who know nothing about this, who are following along with us, maybe we could talk about what the word Zen actually means. Yeah, Zen derives from a Chinese word Chan, which derives from the Sanskrit word dhyana, which basically means meditation or meditative absorption. So the Zen form of Buddhism is a meditation form of Buddhism, meaning that it's not interested in scripture, or that's not its core thing. It's not so interested in doctrinal study. It's not so interested in ritual. It's not so interested in what we might regard as forms of worship. It's interested in the practice of meditation. Now, it's sure, over time, some branches of Zen evolved to look rather more ritualistic than others. I happen to belong to one that is very low on ritual, and its core activity really is meditation practice leading to sort of calming of the nervous system generally, and more ability to concentrate, more ability to understand things more clearly, and more equanimity, more ability to allow our experience to be as it is. That's one part of it. Second part of its sort of mission, so to speak, is awakening, is actually having a personal, direct experience of awakening, which frankly, I don't regard as a religious thing at all. I think it's an intrinsic fact of our existence that we do not normally see. Dimensions or a dimensionlessness of our existence that we do not normally see, and we can see. It's part of our makeup to be able to open to this other sort of aspect of our existence, or other aspects of our existence. That we would call an experience of awakening, a moment of awakening. And then thirdly, how do we live that in life? Well, actually, I mean, we spend even that sort of second aspect, or we call it a fruit of Zen sometimes, that has different depths. It may not be one experience by any means. In fact, in Zen it's rather, perhaps differs from other traditions in that we do not regard that as any kind of goal or something, or destination, or final result or something. No, it's a beginning. And we want that to get clearer and deeper over time. And we have a methodology for bringing people to that kind of experience, and then for bringing them beyond it to deeper experience, more and more and more, until the third fruit of daily life being the embodiment of that starts to really...
embodiment, and how do you walk in the world?
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, you know, we would like somehow the long-range goal somehow of the whole thing is that all beings realize that they are manifesting this great, empty, infinite reality, you know, all the time.
So just for the benefit of our audience who may not know differently, I'm going to ask you a question, which is Zen a religion at all?
Yeah, well, my own answer is emphatically not.
In context, you see people in robes, you see all the mantras, you see all the bowing and the prostration going on and all this, and...
Well, I mean, in our Zen, though, in our lineage of Zen, basically we don't wear robes, we don't shave our heads, we don't... there are forms of Zen where ritual is rather important, and liturgy is very important, the precise way things are done, all that. Well, actually not in our line. We are a line that believes the key thing being transmitted is not cultural trappings. Instead, it's looking into the core of a human being and seeing what we really are.
So the great gambit of Sambo Zen, and that is the lineage you're referring to, is the idea that awakening is actually possible for anyone.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Not only possible, it's happening anyway.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of realizing.
Right, right. So I'm going to ask you a question which is sort of strange. It's a time and space oriented question, which is awakening progressive?
if I look at my own biography, I mean, there's no doubt, you know, I've had various sort of awakening experiences, and it's changed, of course, over time. I mean, I'd say in the end, we may be lucky enough to have sort of deep enough experience where we discover really, in a certain sense, no change can happen. Yeah. You know, in a sense.
It's a reboot.
It's
like a hard drive reboot.
It's a total reboot. It's a total reboot. You know, that kind of thorough experience takes a lot of work for most people. I think it's very, very rare that relatively people having sort of early awakening experiences is not so rare.
Right.
And so we have this methodology where we work with one of those experiences, and the purpose is to have it get deeper and clearer. So in that way it's progressive. In another way it can't be progressive, because there's only one fact, basically. You know, and this is what Shakyamuni Buddha realized. So
I know it was a loaded question, you know. It's like, geez, how do you even begin to address that? So let's talk about what is practice, because there are a lot of people who are going to go, this is it, okay, we don't need to practice. So what is practice, and why do we practice?
Well, for us, practice, I mean, on one level, it simply means sitting on the cushion and doing our meditation practice. Whatever practice it may be, we have different ones that we do. On another level, you know, we hope to be practicing, consciously practicing all the time. We realize that it's not just on the cushion. So we could call it a cultivating of a state of deeper awareness and so on, and to be able to bring that into all activities is...
It's a great goal. I will quote something that you said that I think really addresses the issue of practice. Something was alive in me, and when I sat, it could fulfill itself and grow stronger. I think that's pretty succinct, and I think it's pretty mysterious, and I think it really is the beginning of a wonderful journey.
They talk about nurturing the sacred fetus or something like that sometimes. That there's, you know, they also talk about us having Buddhahood within us that's seeking to be met and sort of recognized and allowed to come forth.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
I mean, I think we have to recognize that the word Buddha doesn't mean anything fancy. It's something about our humanity. It's not some other kind of being. So coming back to the question of is Zen a religion, which I think you brought up already, didn't you? Yeah. You know, you might hear the word Buddha, and yeah, a lot across a lot of Asia, indeed, Buddhism can look like a religion, and is, to all intents and purposes, a religion. People worshipping Buddha, people, you know, making offerings to Buddha, all the functions of religion where there's a laity supporting a religious elite or, you know, a religious hierarchy, and all that sort of stuff that we're familiar with in the West, yeah, that happens.
And it's also really beautiful. I mean, I'm going to Tibet and China next week, and to go to Drang Monastery and some of the stuff in the colorful Bon tradition stuff in Tibetan Buddhism and some of these temples, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tibetan Buddhism is full of deities.
Yeah.
You know, well, Zen is a bit different. There are Zen temples where there's big Buddha statues and that sort of thing, and Kuan Yin, Kenzeon statues. But actually, we need to understand what Buddha means. It just means awakened. Human being discovering something innate about a human being. Right. And the human being's relationship with all other things, discovered through practice. That's what we're concerned with, so that we see, I mean, I regard our sense of self, which causes all our trouble, basically, because it is separate. If we're not separate, really
there couldn't be a self, and there couldn't be anything else.
Exactly. And no self, no problem. So, but to see through ourself is not so easy. And on the other hand, the fact that we have this troublesome misunderstanding about who we are and think that we're a separate entity, it propels our practice. So actually, it's a great thing. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't practice. So it has its own beauty.
What does that mean to you, a stripped down Zen?
Well, it means we're not sort of priestly and monastic, for a start. We don't wear robes. We don't perform the functions of priesthood, you know. On the other hand, we're very, very committed meditators. And we believe that, yeah, there is a sort of purpose to it, which is this deep investigation of a human being. And that you do not need, I mean, to have, what we also, I should say this, what we have inherited and continue with is an extraordinary methodology, which we call Cohen.
No doubt, there's no doubt about this.
We call it Cohen.
It's the most phenomenal, unbelievable process I've ever been through.
Well,
it's just completely revelatory, yeah. So
I'm glad to hear
explain
it.
Explain it. We should talk about what is a Cohen.
Yeah.
A lot of people might not know that.
Yeah, Cohen is basically, the word actually means a public case, so which has a kind of legal background, you know, meaning a sort of established legal precedent, transferred over to a spiritual realm. In other words, a Cohen contains a sort of, it contains the awakening, so to speak. They are mostly stories, tiny little stories of things that great awakened masters said or did from this marvelous period in Chinese history, the Tang dynasty, when Zen really started to flourish, roughly 600 to 900 AD. And it was a confluence in a way of Buddhism and Taoism, sort of somehow the best of both, so I think, you know. And a koan, so it's a little nugget of the something an awakened master did during that time, which still contains the world as they experienced it. So we sit with it, we take it into our meditation, and you know, it's a puzzle, it's a riddle, it's an enigma, until it does its work and brings us to some taste, some personal lived glimpse of the world of the original master.
That's great, because this is a quote again from your master with just a few words. Tasting through our direct experience. I'd like to just make that point that the issue of direct experience is a core value of Sambo Zen. In your case, there's a quote which was, healing the skin, healing the mind, and healing what I do not have a word for. So what is Kensho now? There's another word that might baffle people.
Kensho means something like seeing reality, or seeing our true nature, seeing our inherent nature. And it means having an awakening experience of suddenly, we think it always has a sudden quality. It may be very dramatic, it may be rather quiet, but it's sudden. It's a sudden shift where the way we have always experienced the world vanishes, and we suddenly discover one of various things may be revealed. It may be revealed that everything is in fact singular, that all the multiplicity of phenomena, somehow they're all one, and we are part of that one. It may also be a moment of clearly seeing that actually this me that I've taken myself to be doesn't actually exist and never has. And it's astonishing, you know.
It is astonishing. Both of those things can happen simultaneously.
Oh,
they're happening simultaneously right now.
Yes. Well,
isn't that remarkable?
Well, and the third thing that we can see is that this world of things, apparently solid and liquid and gaseous, you know, the world of things that we perceive before us actually is totally insubstantial. It's here with the reality that we know, and yet it's all apparition. It's all a movie. It's all, in fact, a dream.
A fairy tale.
A fairy tale. And it's not really here the way we think it is. The real experience, in a sense, is all of them together. It's when we call that sort of shinku.
Shinku?
Yeah, it's true, vast nothing. You know, true.
Well, there is this word emptiness that a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with, and Shunyata, which is, some people know in Buddhism, that sounds very empty.
Yeah, shunya means empty.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what is emptiness? What is Shunyata?
Yeah, well,
And what is that direct experience like?
Shunyata is, you know, it does mean something like emptiness. So it gets translated that way. But there simply are no words for what it's attempting to designate. That great, crazy Tibetan teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, he said, Shunyata, it's like falling out of an airplane. The bad news is that you haven't got a parachute. The good news is there's no ground. Even then, though, that conveys some sense of space, whereas the real shunyatas, space and time are gone. We discover that space is, let's say, it's a property of phenomena. It's not that phenomena exist in space, but space itself is developed, let's say, with a Big Bang, so to speak, that there was no space. Now, the point, I think what we see in one of these experiences is that what predates the Big Bang is still here. It's simply that functioning in the way it does.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Now, I know one of the puzzles for people not familiar with this tradition is they hear something like emptiness, they hear me talking about nothing at all or something, and it doesn't sound particularly nice. Yeah. It sounds very nihilistic even. It's not at all. It's the most incredible, we're going to the birthplace of everything. The birthplace of every moment. So we're going to the most fertile, fecund, generous, creative potentiality that there could ever be is what we're discovering. It just happens to be nothing at all. But if we think that therefore we sort of we're aiming for that or something, we're going to get sort of stuck down there. Wrong. It's not about that. We actually say that if you discover the real nothing, everything then becomes wondrous being. It's a Zen saying. Dogen said, great master Dogen from the 13th century Zen master, he said, at some point, the treasure chamber opens by itself, and we use the treasure at will. I mean, he's talking about sitting, standing up, walking, drinking a glass of water. Treasure, all of it is treasure. And this is part of the Zen tradition, actually. It has an emphasis on the ordinary things, because it doesn't regard ordinary things as any less wondrous.
Right, no. What is ordinary about ordinary?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So coming back to on a more discursive level, just for a minute, indulge me. The fundamental issue here appears to be belief in separation. The belief that I'm inside here and you're out there. Does that secret inside self really exist?
There are processes going on, but somehow a mysterious thing happens we call identification, that perceives these processes and says, oh, that's me. It sort of conjures itself like a genie out of nothing. But once it's done it, it's very, very persuasive.
It's strong as all get out, right? No doubt about it. Yeah, so if the self is actually a process and the identification and the attachment doesn't happen, what differentiates me from everything else?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean,
yeah.
if there is no independent, individualized me, what's the difference between me and everything? I have to be that, right?
Well, my first experience of that ilk was when I was 19 years old, and I had this strange moment. I was on a beach. I was, totally reared in rational humanism. Didn't really have any religious life at all, no spiritual life. In a certain way, I still think I don't, actually. But I was staring at the water one afternoon, the sunlight on the water, and kind of watching how these sort of scales of bright light were sliding over the black surface of the water. And I was trying to figure out, is it bright or is it black, dark? And it was kind of both, and it was moving, and you couldn't really hold anything, nothing could be held. And I think, well, wait a minute, water's transparent, air's transparent. I'm only seeing this surface, and light, the sun is bouncing off there, and light itself you don't see, actually. You see the things it bounces off, and I was kind of puzzling. What am I really seeing? And all of a sudden, what I was looking at, and me, the looker, they were just not two things. Instead of being two, they were one somehow. And of course, it's difficult to convey it, especially if you haven't tasted that. If you have, you know it. Somehow, suddenly, I am simply no different from what I'm seeing. And it was absolutely mind-blowing for me. And suddenly it was as if the whole universe turned into a kind of field of floating sparks, and all of it was immediately present. And I got this sense, I remember very vividly, that the very beginning of time was right at the tip of my nose, and that the furthest reaches of the universe were here. I mean, I couldn't explain it. It made absolutely no sense to me. Right. And I had no interest in that kind of thing. It wasn't like I'd been reading
Isn't that funny?
mystical books. I almost identified myself as a rational atheist, that mystical nonsense. I mean, I didn't even really know about it. It just was outside my interests. I mean, I like poetry. That was as far as I went, and Greek poetry, but it suddenly hit me, and it was absolutely marvelous. It was as if I saw that my whole life had been a dream, actually, and now I'd woken to this vast reality. I knew I could die. Now, I felt I'd fulfilled what my life had been for. I was only 19 years old. And,
the beauty of that story for me, part of the beauty of that story, is it actually happened before you even began your meditative practice.
Yeah.
So this kind of spontaneous glimpse happens.
It does happen.
We may not identify it with that, but it's sort of like you were saying with Buddha, he thought back and here's something that happened when he was very, very young.
Yeah.
But even more amazing than that, to me, the inexplicable, boundless love.
Well, I think if we've been identified as a separate entity, and all of a sudden we discover that we are utterly inseparable, what is that going to do to our hearts? I remember actually that night, I couldn't sleep. I just felt this, it was like it was like a flame of love burning in my chest, and it just wouldn't stop. And it was, it was totally marvelous. And but I had no, in the weeks after, I really had no sort of framework to put it in. So for a while, I just floated. For a couple of weeks, I remember, it just sort of, I was as if I'd somehow been turned inside out or something, and I had no mass left. I was just floating in a kind of bliss. But it didn't last.
Right.
It didn't last.
This is the point. Now I got it, now I don't.
Yeah.
Now I got it, now I don't. That's so interesting, and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about practice and the deepening and this thing that you can explain logically about progressive nature of that and how it seems to slowly eat you alive.
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
And the Zen tradition does. One metaphor that's sometimes used is that it's like a sheet of opaque glass. When we have a moment of awakening, a hole is drilled through that glass, and we suddenly discover this sort of seemingly other realm, other reality, other dimension, beyond the pane of glass. And it's incredible. Wow, there's something on the other side. And what we do is we start working with these koans.
Yeah.
And they have the capacity to expand that hole. So then we drill new holes, and suddenly bigger holes, and more holes. And gradually the pane of glass is getting less structurally sound. And at some point, there's going to be some tap, and the whole thing falls down. And then we finally realize that this realm is that awakened realm. And we come home, and we're really home in a way that is indescribable. And it's far different. What I was describing, that first experience, it's a scratch on the surface compared to what we really are heading toward. True home. True home.
Can I now,
Yeah.
I want to baffle our audience, because you're an atheist. This is going to blow people's minds.
In terms of other traditions, one thing that is very distinctive about the Buddhist insight is what we call no self. That instead of there being a notion that there's some core self that is basically our soul that needs to unite with a greater reality that we might call God, we never had it in the first place. Exactly. So we would see it more like the Galilean revolution, that we think we're at the center of the universe. And it turns out we can let that go. We let go of that geocentric view, so to speak, self-centric view. Let go of it.
Beautiful quote. The world was one luminosity. This is from your book again. A simple act of loving. The whole world is love's plaything. A single act of loving. Joy. The joy of putting down the heaviest burden. Holding the world together as Henry knew it. God. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I believe that we have to go through something that in the religious traditions is known as metanoia, which means literally something like a changing of mind. It's usually translated actually as repentance. We have to go through this deep humility, I guess, when we realize we've been wrong. We've been thoroughly wrong. I went through that at some point in my journey. I still, of course, have to, I still go very wrong again, you know, and still have to do it again, you know. But that to go through that change of heart and mind, where we recognize our wrongness, because we've discovered reality. That is, I guess, quite, in most theological or theistic traditions have that as a sort of moment when you kind of find God. And you find that your view of things has been so wrong because it didn't have God in it. So we certainly, I think, in this Zen way, go through something like that. Right. It's just that we cannot have, I don't know where to put God. Right. I like you said it earlier, beautifully. There isn't really, I mean, you know, if you tell me everything is God, I mean, I can accept that. You know, I could say that's consistent with my experience. But then why do you add the word?
Well, you know, there is, yeah. Well, it gets back to discriminatory thought and packages and externalizing and me versus you, and it's right back down the rabbit hole.
It can be. And I don't know, I think probably it depends what kind of context you grow up in. For some people it's second nature to think about God and talk about God. Some people it's not.
Such peace from your book. Such peace. Living in the aftermath of a long war. Oh, can I identify with that? Tell me a little bit about that war.
The long struggle of the self. And then I suppose some kind of war with it to be liberated from it. There was one 20th century Zen master who used to talk about, he'd say there was a fight going on between a false self and a true self. And, you know, there's a point where...
Talk about clinging.
Exactly, exactly.
Life and death? Clinging.
Life and death, and it is life and death. Mm-hmm. Except that the thing that thinks it's fighting for its life never really had any life anyway. But that's no help, because it thinks it does. It really thinks it does. So it is a, in my case, it was a long struggle.
So you said then, in this story, and I was reading of your life, it occurred to me that even experiences that I'd had over the years were also empty. We're talking about memories, we're talking about the whole string. Yeah, isn't that phenomenal?
Well, we tend to, you know, if we have an awakening experience,
yeah,
we'll tend to remember that we had it.
Yeah.
Right. And then,
right.
Well, obviously that's a
well,
nonsense.
Yeah, isn't that something though? I mean, you know, in the most superficial ways, what is a memory other than a thought arising in the moment?
That's what I mean. To remember an awakening experience is a complete nonsense.
So, then you said in your book, and I like this a lot, I was perched on a cliff. Who is it that is breathing? What is this space between breath, thinking, searing, seeing, hearing? What is this bright light shining? And then the miraculous, the truly miraculous, is that in the end, that anything exists at all. Then, you say in your book, everything was gone. Everything in between erased. It was like a boot kicking at a lamp that illuminated everything. It was like a boot kicking at the lamp that illuminated everything. Now, I believe that you actually fell to the floor during this experience. Anyway, I've had the privilege of knowing some people that have had very similar experiences to this. my question always is, what reports this if not awareness itself?
It's a fair question, but I believe that if you've been through this experience, you don't need to ask it. The experience has.
It's a reboot. I mean, now we're talking about the reboot. This is a reset. This is a complete reset.
Everything's been different since then. It's weird that I can say that, but it was a moment in time, a point in time, a very exact point in time. And it happened. It was like a axe falling on the crown of my head, and everything vanished. And everything vanished. There was no... Somehow, all the other experiences that I'd had of this kind of ilk, there was still some kind of witness. Not in this one. There was no seer, there was no seeing, there was nothing to see. But it wasn't going to sleep. It was nothing. It was truly nothing. And I feel somehow that that moment is still going on. And it's still here in every moment of my life. And it changed everything. I mean, that's when that war ended. You know, and it's all been different since then. Now, I mean, some people say it's sort of naive to think that there's such an awakening experience that changes everything. Because it's true, those other ones didn't. They opened up things I never knew, changed things in that sense, but they didn't.
Wipe the slate.
They didn't wipe the slate. No, when the Zen terminology, kick out the bottom of the bucket. Yeah. Although even that's not enough. There's just no bucket. There's nothing. There's nothing. And then everything's reborn. It's really a death, actually. The nearest description that I know to it, that fits it best, is I died. Well, obviously I'm here. Yeah. I didn't die in some sense I didn't die. And in some sense I did die. I can't understand it. But I can't even really think about it in a way. But somehow I think I can speak from it.
Yeah. And I think it's incredibly important that you do.
Look, when I read the Zen masters now, or ever since that moment, they've glowed. And I know what they're talking about. Prior to that, I could get it, you know, and at times I could be right in there. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. I mean, this is the great gift. I believe this is the sort of pivot, fulcrum, turning point of a human lifetime.
Right.
I believe, I don't know how to explain it. It's very hard to talk about. But I know that some kind of extraordinary, I mean, incalculable, inconceivable shift is possible for us. And it changes everything. And I've done it, or it's happened to me, without a theistic context. So I can only speak about it in those terms. Others, I'm sure others have similar things in a theistic context, and so they would speak about it in those terms.
I don't know if I've ever heard in theistic terms, but I've met some remarkable people in my life. And this is not the first time that I've heard this. So coming out of that, another quote, I was given this greatest opportunity of all opportunities to be a human being. You know, you said in another project that we're working on that, you know, we as human beings haven't been around a whole hell of a long time.
From a Zen perspective, it's just this very, very recent marvel that the universe is here, you know.
Yeah.
And in that context, it's created these beings, us, humans, and we somehow have the capacity to rediscover what it is to be. That is the most incredible. Well, I don't want to put any word on it.
This gets to another part of Buddha's solution to suffering, which has to do with the end of suffering and tanha.
You can spend your life pursuing compounded things, created things, things that have come together through causes and conditions. And they are intrinsically impermanent. In fact, they're intrinsically empty. They are pursuing phantoms. But you spend your life doing that, and it won't make you happy. Or you can spend your life pursuing what has not been compounded, what has not been created, what has not arisen through causes and conditions. And that will be the way to...
Yeah, well, here's your quote. The system had been uprooted, and in its place, in the whole, the I and earth previously claimed, a sweet spring kept welling up, gushing with joy. In your book, all it took was to give ourselves up. How could you be of anything but service?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you could sit in bliss. And the story is that when Buddha had his great awakening, for 1 week or 3 weeks, depending on the version of the story, he just sat there. There was nothing to do.
Was it Vishnu? I don't know.
Yeah,
who came down and slap him
gods.
around, you know.
Yeah, I think maybe Vishnu, and one of the gods came and said, "Hey, what are you doing sitting here?" And he said, "Well, I've awoken. You know, there's nothing to do." And the god said, "But look at all the suffering beings." And he said, "Well, I can't help them. They'll never understand that what has happened to me. They're too caught in the way they understand things." And the god said, "That's as may be, but you got to go and try." Actually, he said it would be like asking them to swim against the stream. And so he got up off his seat and agreed to start trying to help. So, yeah, I mean, in this tradition, you know, that I'm in, we have this ideal we call the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva dedicates themselves to the liberation of all beings, to the ending of suffering for all beings. Saying, I won't... See, in the early Buddhist model, the ideal was something called the Arhat. The ideal there is that you awaken and do not get born again. You escape the cycle of reincarnation. You're freed from it, you know. But then in this so-called Mahayana Buddhism, which developed around the 1st century AD, it had this different ideal that, no, as a bodhisattva, you won't sort of check out. You'll stick around helping until the last being has been liberated. Only then will you check out, so to speak. But actually, so that's one way it was evolved. Then another evolution happened on top of that, which was actually the realization that this life of, this wheel of birth and death, this existence that we're in, seems a place of suffering, but for the Bodhisattva it is not. It is already nirvana. That this samsara, so-called, is one and the same as nirvana. And we see through it. Now this, you know, I mean, I have no idea about reincarnation. I've certainly had experiences that could be interpreted in that way, but I just don't know. So my assumption is, I have no assumption. Therefore, we just we see through this life, in a sense. We see that it's an appearance.
Yeah. Gradually, it became clear how this reality got obscured. This again from your book. It was thinking and believing those thoughts. Is thinking itself divisive?
if you see thoughts, there's no problem. If you hear thoughts, there's no problem. It's more that when we jump on board them, we get carried by them, we're taken way out of the present moment, and we're taken into, you know, sort of fantasy land. Buddha actually called it prapancha, meaning proliferation of thought and feeling. Very often they go together, and we can generate a lot of suffering through being caught in those eddies of thought and feeling.
I can identify with that, totally, yeah. So, Buddha talked about something he called, I guess, sensorium, sensations, perceptions, and thought. And so everything, this again, this quote from your manuscript, so everything we experience, everything we create our beliefs from, arises from our obsession with sensorium?
Well, Buddha said that, he called it the all, A-L-L, the all, that the all is our sensorium, that actually the totality of what a person is what they see, what they hear, what they feel, taste, smell, think. That actually we cannot experience anything sort of outside of our sense channels. That's including consciousness as the sixth sense. But what he also said is that if you study any of the sense channels closely enough, first of all, you see that it sort of breaks down into, so to speak, 5 steps, which is called the skandhas. But if you study any point in the sort of the creation of a sense experience, closely enough, you see that it's hollow, empty, insubstantial. In other words, all our sensory experience is happening. That's what we're composed of. But if you look at any of it closely enough, you see that it's hollow, empty, insubstantial. Well, this is awakening, isn't it?
This is a very powerful statement and a true one, I think. It was possible to see the obscuring process in action and cherish it without being caught by it.
Cherishing our delusions, so to speak. I mean, one of my teachers once, Joan Rick, she said to me, when our little self is sort of active, we just give it a big hug and a lot of love.
This is probably the most traumatic time in Western culture that I can imagine in this lifetime, at least, okay? There's war. There is more war than you could even imagine. We're in so many wars. There's Brexit, there's the wall, there's racism, there's greed, there's all sorts of stuff going on. And you actually talked about a period of time in China, in the Tang Dynasty, where this happened. Maybe you could talk a little about that.
Yeah, you know, Zen actually emerged in a time of great crisis. China went through a catastrophic civil war in the mid-8th century, when Zen was really hitting its stride. And according to some records, you know, more than half the population of China was actually killed in that 8-year period, which represented something like 1/6 of the entire global population of human beings at the time. And so, although I know in some circles Zen has a kind of reputation of being very sort of complacent and, I don't know.
I don't think immolation is complacent, and Thich Nhat Hanh was the one who brought that to everyone's attention when he was hanging out with Martin Luther King.
Thank you. I mean, it's absolutely wrong. Zen is actually a response to crisis. It's like being pushed deeper to find resources that we didn't know we had, to find reality that we were not aware of, from which we can live in a new way. And so I think it's very pertinent to today, when divisiveness and separation and separateness and animosity and hostility is just growing and growing and growing, and being fueled and fed in very unscrupulous ways by people who should know better. You know, we have to dig deep. We have to do what we can, of course, you know, to work against that. But the most important work we can do, I believe, is to get clear that to know this world as it really is, without any separation anywhere, and to be trained in operating from that, living that out. That's what Zen training is for. Now,
to be able to operate in the world.
Well, yeah, we get trained in living that, not just discovering it, but living it. You know, and I know there are some traditions where people don't really understand what practice means. Well, practice means ongoing training. You know, to have one awakening is nothing in Zen.
Yeah.
We want to go on and on till all trace of awakening has been absolutely erased, because you can't even talk about it anymore. And on beyond that, where we are doing all we can to work for other beings. And you know, and even then it goes on. You know, that's actually an endless task. Blessed endless task.
Yeah, a blessed endless task. The training, this is a quote from you, the training is all about how to live out awakening, to have it be the bedrock and the bare fact of life. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes guidance. It takes time, even though it's not here. Zen cannot be a matter of self-interest. I love that. Isn't it obviously true? So Dogen, who is this great master we haven't even touched upon, was in a temple that I'm going to visit in a week. I can't wait. And his teacher said, walk by and said, drop the body. Drop the body. What did he mean?
Oh, he said, well, he was sitting in that temple, in Tiantong Temple, I guess, and he'd been in China for about 2 years, 2.5 years maybe, at that point, having come on a pilgrimage from Japan as a youngish man in his early 20s, mid-20s. And he heard the teacher berating a monk for falling asleep. He said to him, what are you doing falling asleep? Don't you know the principle of Zen is body and mind fall away? Something like that. The dust of body and mind fall away, or something like that. Shinjin Datsuraku in Japanese is a famous phrase. And Dogen heard this, and somehow it triggered a great experience for him. And he had his great awakening right then. The abbot, the master, went back to his room, actually after saying this, and Dogen followed him, according to the story, and walked in and lit incense and bowed. And the master sort of said, well, what are you doing? You know, he said, and Dogen said, body and mind have fallen away. And the master said, body and mind have fallen away. Confirming. He could tell right away, but Dogen was right. Dogen then said, wait a minute, don't be so hasty. Yeah. This might be just a temporary state. And the master said, no. Fallen away body, fallen away mind. And so this turned out that the master was absolutely right, that this very deep thing had happened in Dogen's training. And he'd actually done about a decade prior to that of Cohen study. And we feel in our lineage that we're following a similar pattern, that we hope, somebody has an initial awakening, we work with the Cohens, they have more, they get deeper and clearer, until maybe they reach this point where they're perched on the edge of the cliff, and something, we don't know what, some magical impulse somehow, will push them off the cliff, and they're gone. And that's really what we exist for, is that deep, thorough awakening experience. That's why we still exist as a Zen lineage. And there are other kinds of Zen lineage that do slightly different approaches to us. That's what we stand for. That's what we're for. And it seems to sometimes, not always, work. Even when it doesn't work, there are immeasurable benefits.
Oh, yeah.
We get from just sitting.
Okay. What I love about this, though, is that you were quick to say that that's not the end. What matters is how we enact it in the world with other people at the forefront of our caring. What else would you do?
Really, every Cohen is trying to show us that what our real life is, what our real existence is. And that we have no better, there could not possibly be any other way of living than when we're clear about who and what we are. There's no other way to live than for what we are, actually, which is not us. It's that we're precisely the opposite of what we thought we were. Everything we thought we were, that's not what we are. Everything we thought we weren't, that is what we are. It's a, what do they call it? A figure ground reversal.
Yeah, right.
That's actually what this is about. But to really live that, I mean, and to really see it, clearly now.
In the end, it's a fairy tale from your manuscript. In the end, it's all a fairy tale. In the end, all Zen saves us from is ourselves. That's true. It may be inaccurate, but not unreasonable to say that in the end, all Zen is love.
Yeah. Well, it must be. I mean, the whole thing is one bodhisattva. So what else can it be?
I think you're saying some remarkable things, and I think you're saying them in ways that can reach out to people. I think you reach out to people in between the words, Henry.